مرحبا مجددا. سعيدة أن أكون معكم اليوم بجلسة الذكاء الاصطناعي والصحافة الاستقصائية سلاح ذو حدين. أنا سجا مرتضى، مديرة الشبكة العربية لمدققي المعلومات AFCN من أريج. وكان يعني من حسن حظي أني من سنتين بلشت بمغامرة تسمى الذكاء الاصطناعي بدعم من روان اللي شدتني على الموضوع، وأنا ما كان بدي طبعا، بس هي شجعتني عليه وفتت غصبا عني، بس طلعت من هيدي التجربة سعيدة جدا وفخورة فيها. سنتين قدرت فيهم اتعلم عن الذكاء الاصطناعي وكيف ممكن عن جد يساعد عملنا كصحفيين وصحفيات ومدققين ومدققات معلومات.
And fact checkers, how can all our fear, it's very positive to our work in this world. Really happy in this session. I'd like to talk about this fear that we all face as journalists. Is it actual that AI is beneficial to our work, or is it taking our place in doing something that we didn't want to do in our lives? It would be creative more than us. Really happy to have Lawrence Becamp. He's the founder of Journalism Today, Tom, and the executive director in Fund Foundation, and Mark Tarzi is the director of the Continuous Center in the Bazad University in Palestine. We should have Nabil out there, but he apologized for out of his control circumstances. Welcome, everybody. I will start with you, Tom. In our hall, we have a lot of investigative journalists. They'd like to know how much AI is influential to the journalism, especially investigative one, and your own experience and work with journalists and your experience with ARIJ to building our own strategy for artificial intelligence. What would you like to tell us?
Well, thank you so much for having me. As I was thinking about what I'd want to talk about today, I was remembering the last time I was in Amman for the ARIJ conference, which was in 2019. And obviously, the world has changed a lot since then, but really it's only 4 years ago, right? And one of the things that struck me about that conference was listening to Marina Walker-Guevara, who was at the time with ICIJ, and Samia Ayash, who's obviously now with ARIJ. And they both presented these amazing sessions on how AI was being used to support investigative journalism. Marina presented on how ICIJ had used machine learning to spot patterns in medical files, so hundreds of thousands of documents. How can we possibly know where to start investigating them? And Samia presented some really interesting work that looked at satellite imagery and how we could train AIs to spot illegal mines. Now, these are things that we have known about, right, for 4 years. And so I think in terms of opportunities and ways that we can look at AI, there's already many, many examples from, even going back further, 2016, 2017. And I think what we need to really focus on is more looking at that creativity and thinking about ways that we can apply it in our own work. I think some things that have changed. So fundamentally what I'm saying is this is already happening. And we can all use these tools. I think that there's some things that have changed since then. One is that the speed of the technological development has accelerated a lot and is accelerating ever faster. So that puts a bit of pressure on us all to try and keep up with understanding what the latest tools can do. But I think that along with that has come an increased accessibility to AI technologies. And now there's a lot of off-the-shelf tools that we can use to do the kinds of things that ICIJ was having to build themselves back in 2019. So I think this is a really positive thing. And thirdly, and maybe this is most important for us all, is that in 2019, AI was this kind of like abstract, far-off topic that most of us hadn't interacted with AI knowingly, and we weren't thinking about AI a lot. Now, I think that there's a really increased awareness of what AI is and what it can do, because just hands up if anyone's ever played with ChatGPT. Okay, we can see many people. And we saw this, I think we saw this even in the work we were doing with ARIJ, which started before ChatGPT had launched, and a lot of the newsroom weren't very aware of what AI could do. And then we came in a few months after ChatGPT had launched, and everybody's very excited and familiar because we can see this kind of real-world application of AI, and we can start thinking about what that can mean for our work. So I think what my hope is that this increased access and this increased awareness can really spark a lot of creative thinking about what these kinds of tools could do for our work. And again, we don't need to look too far. We can think about the many examples we have of AI being used to help us understand big data sets, whether it's documents that have been leaked or publicly available data, or satellite imagery that we can use to spot environmental destruction and other tools. And I think AI is one area, the whole theme of this conference is cross-border collaboration. And as we were working with ARIJ on the strategy development, it's clear that for AI to succeed, we need a lot of collaboration, not just across borders with other newsrooms, but also with other sectors, with universities and technologists and data analysts. And we need to bring in these people who maybe traditionally haven't worked in news, but can offer a lot of value and help us do our work. That's one edge of the sword. The other edge of the sword, I think, and you could see this as a challenge or an opportunity. Investigative journalists are always having to learn new skills and learn how to investigate new subjects, whether it's environment or financial records. I think AI, it's such an important topic for us all to understand at a basic level, at least, because we can see in our daily lives the way that AI is being used by other people in ways that we need to investigate and help our audiences understand. So just as I was thinking about this yesterday, there was a report came out in 972 and today in The Guardian talking about how the IDF is using AI to draw up targeting lists for the strikes it's carrying out in Gaza. So one question that we could have all thought about is how on earth are there so many strikes? How do they know what they're striking? Well, it turns out that they're using an AI tool called Hobsara, which I guess they built themselves. And this tool is basically suggesting different locations to strike. Now, we don't know what parameters they're using. We don't know what they know really, or why the AI is making these recommendations. But in previous wars, Israel had a problem of not having enough targets to strike. Earlier this year, the former head of the IDF said that it used to take a year to draw up 50 targets. The AI is helping them draw up 100 targets a day. 100 targets a day. So if you can think about that scale of what AI is doing, it's really an important story for us to try and investigate, not just because of what's happening now, but if we look ahead to potential war crimes investigations, the use of AI in this way is going to throw up many, many issues around how much people know about what's going on. So it's really, I'm encouraging you to think about how you use AI in your work, because I think it will help the work that you're doing already. But I also think that in the process of learning about AI, to use it yourselves, you will also learn how to better investigate how AI systems are being used by those in power and how they're being used against citizens.
شكرا كثير توم. لورنس، توم حكى عن
Tom mentioned big, not positive and negative aspects. I would like always to focus on the positive, but I'd like to mention positive aspects. There are a lot of people of using ChatGPT, and of course there are other tools as well. I can see these tools can create bias or mis and disinformation at the same time. What are the things that the negative that we should pay attention to when you are using AI intelligence?
Shukran, Sasha. And first of all, I would like to say that it has been a privilege to be part of ARIJ ongoing efforts with AI, and I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for inviting me. Yes, when it comes to these negative impacts or negative things that that are surrounded by AI, it might be good that it's good to establish a shared vocabulary on what we mean when we talk about AI. And I think when we talk about AI today, we mostly talk about machine learning systems. That's the sort of applied AI that we use. And all of these systems are initially built, developed, and trained by humans. So it's human beings who provide the examples, the data for the machines to learn from. And it's not only by finding and providing these examples that we can train these models. These examples need to be labeled and fitted into these predefined categories. And labeling the data is also another human task and a human responsibility. And with this process of how we generally teach machines, with this process in mind, it's easy to understand how human bias, incompleteness, blind spots, subjectivity, current power, authority, and influence will find its way into the training and also the performance of those systems. Because who gets to decide if these systems perform well, in what kind of context? That's also what human beings do. So supervised learning is most of the applied AI that we use today, is the type of machine learning we use most. And there's this big caveat when it comes to the AI software many people use today, like ChatGPT, for example. We often don't know who the supervisors are, the ones that trained the systems. We don't know their thinking, we don't know their reasoning, as Tom told with this targeting system, and we don't know their protocols. We can't check them, we can't hold them to account. And we don't know what their business, economic, social, or power goals are. And then these are just a few of these facts when it comes to training. And then after that, there's the fact that Arabic and African languages being sort of low resource languages for AI systems. So therefore, they're underperforming in their accuracy and usefulness compared to, say, English. And there's a heavy burden on our climate by means of the energy that's being used to power the data centers and the GPUs, the computer systems that we need to train the AI systems. And if that's not cumbersome enough, there's a lot of data laborers, the click workers that train these systems as well, that label the images or give feedback to the systems about things that people are not allowed to generate or to ask. The click workers, they live in the poorest countries in the world. They're being exploited for $2 a day to do this kind of tedious work. And yeah, I think that those are a bit of the negative sides. I do, when preparing this session, focused on some positive sides as well, but maybe that's for a bit later on in this panel.
لورنس ليه ما بتخبرنا شوي عن كتابك؟
Would you tell us more about your book? What is concentrating on? Which one?
About my book?
Yes.
Yes, well, so in 2020, I worked with a machine learning engineer from a Dutch publisher, where there are a lot of news titles, which they own. It's called DPG Media. And she was only working on the publishing side with AI. It's for recommendations. If you like this article, maybe this article is for you. If you read a lot about these topics, why not subscribe to our newsletter, stuff like that. So the recommendations and personalization. If you live in this part of the city or of the country, this kind of news might especially be of interest to you. But then we did a project when I was at Google with the Google News Lab with this publisher, and we thought, why not go into the editorial side of it? How can we use AI from an editorial or investigative journalism perspective? And then we found out that a lot of people had a lot of questions. And then we decided, after giving some workshops and initial trainings, to write a book with a basic introduction into machine learning, practical machine learning for creative people like journalists. And it came out in 2022 in June. And after that, the first generative imaging tools came, like DALL-E and Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. I think Khaled mentioned that tool as well. All pieces of software where you could use to generate images just by typing in some command, and it generated an image for you. That was 1 week after the book came out. And then 6 months later, it was ChatGPT that took the limelight of all things AI, obviously. And well, now I'm thinking about a next chapter or a next book about but it will be focused on the future of our work, of our creative and editorial work.
شكرا كثير لورنس. مروان.
Thanks a lot, Lawrence. I'm going to Marwan now. You are from Palestine, and now we are seeing the unfortunate events that going on in Gaza. And we see now that on social media, so many things are going on, so many images, so many clips, so many of them are generated by artificial intelligence. It's really hard to find out if they are actual, authentic or not. If we go deeper about the ethical challenges and ethical standards that as journalists, and even when we teach the media students, what should we concentrate on now that we are into the AI world and the rapid developments? I'd like to start now. We are trying to obtain information, and we try to experiment and see that the information are blocked, and the information that we need to talk about and emphasize, these are unavailable and are censored. There's a problem for us. So when we go deeper into the situation, we see that there are so many issues and ethical issues, not only ethical regarding artificial intelligence, but they are about the very far dimensions. If we can rapidly go through issues that related to ethically related to investigative entropy, we have fake news, dis and misinformation. We have privacy information regarding how to depend on this information, depending on data, and how to. It's very hard to depend on this data if the news are authentic or not. There's a lot of information regarding Gaza now because AI is used for safety, for protection of journalists. Journalists are being targeted. There are AI systems that they know where they are living and they are can identify their location and they are striked or kidnapped or harmed in a very various ways. What we are talking now about, the question is that we want to talk about the question is more complicated and larger than just the ethical system about investigative journalism. This system, we have a general ethical problem that we are facing as a international community. What's going on in Gaza now is unbelievable. How can we believe that the world are watching what's going on day by day and no one is saying anything? This has nothing to do with AI. No artificial intelligence, no technology. This is something wrong with the people mentality, as we say. If we examine that, what's going on in Gaza now, we see blood, people are being killed, and so harmful and graphic scenes. But there's similar thing that's going on in the whole world, that the environment, the atmosphere, the destruction of environment, its impact will be devastating for humanity in general. The whole humanity has a problem now. There's another problem with the disaster of artificial intelligence itself. Now everybody knows that artificial intelligence, it's an unleashed genie, because the genie is out of the bottle and they don't know what to do with it. It can destroy this world. The ethical landscape that we are facing now, we have a problem. The question now is, let's go back to Gaza as an example. How come that the world is silent against what's going on? Is it indifference for what's going on? Is it that people, they are social platforms and the data, everybody now it's connected. We all are watching. Everybody now, the majority of people who are present here are connected out of this hall as well, because they are using their phones and they are watching on social media. There's a factor that's impacting us, and this is running by an algorithm, by the artificial intelligence. They are controlling what's going on. Is it that AI and technology are orienting us to another dimension of consciousness. The huge problem that what we should examine, it was also mentioned by the previous session about, they asked about how come what the false news happens, it's disseminated very quickly, and when then investigative journalism, nobody would consider what they are saying. The problem is what's going on? Why the situation? What is the role of artificial intelligence in that? I think now that we are in an era and our world is the artificial intelligence is interfering with everything in our life, like it or not. So like it or not, if the artificial intelligence is present, the big questions that implied in investigative and journalism, how can we as collectively to limit the bad impacts of coming out of artificial intelligence? How can we collectively, what's going on now in Gaza, I watch people just watching what's going on. It's not reacting to it. It's not a matter of Israel and Palestine. What's going on now, that this is something that impacts the ethical system of the whole world. If we can't collectively stop that and try to limit this giant, if we cannot limit it, it will be facing a huge hazard. So this is my recommendation.
Thank you so much, Marwan. That is something very important. It's that a part of the problem related, or let's say, I mean, all problems or good or bad use of the AI, all this is related to the way we use it. And this does not apply only to, I mean, the public, but also to the Arab journalists. They really still lack of knowledge in this regard. So please tell me, what's the best way to guide, according to which we can guide journalists for the best use of AI?
So I think, well, I think that the ARIJ strategy is an amazing starting place, and because it was built not just as something for ARIJ themselves, but as a model and a playbook for all of the regional newsrooms and all of the network members, right? So even if you're at the very beginning of a journey on AI, there's so many good resources in there that can help you understand what steps you might want to go through. This is useful because when it comes to thinking about tools that need to be built, it can be very expensive to build tools. But if you can identify needs that you share together, and I know that ARIJ is doing really important work on Arabic language translations of existing tools, which is fundamental. But if you can pool resources and pool and share needs, then you can be building tools that will help the whole network, and you can be building tools within a strong ethical framework and with all of the constraints and limitations that responsible development of these tools needs. So I would think about going to the strategy site, going through, there's a quiz that will just ask you some questions about your newsroom and where you are. And then it will give you some suggestions for what you might want to do next. And maybe often the first step, and we need to keep coming back to this, and this is what Lawrence and I spend a lot of time doing, is going to different kinds of newsrooms, big international global newsrooms and tiny newsrooms with only 2 or 3 people, and explaining what is supervised learning, what is unsupervised learning, what are the basic terms that we're talking about, and how can we better understand which of these approaches is going to be most useful for the work that we're doing.
Lawrence?
Yes, well, there are a couple of things I would like to add, and I think I agree with Marwan, is if you are a journalist, you have to understand how AI works, because if it's being used for warfare, and you want to report about that. And you have to have some basic understanding on what it is and how it's being used. If you want to investigate how these messages spread on social media, and you know that social media is heavily sort of governed by algorithms and machine learning, you have to understand its workings. And if you're a journalist and working with any kind of technology, all your technologies will become AI powered in the future. So you will have to understand how it works. And I think the fourth point is, you can use certain AI-powered tools in your to advance your work. And if you allow me, I've come across an important distinction that's being made right now, and I've prepared a little bit. So, because there are two broad uses of AI. So one is when you have to report and investigate, you have to understand it. But the two broad uses are generative and discriminative. And generative got all the hype. But discriminative is the type we talk about when we use AI to analyze and when we process data. So measuring sentiments in texts, detecting objects in images, and finding patterns between or entities in documents. And for predictions like the weather, housing prices, or the spread of the flu. That's all the old style of AI. So that's what we now call discriminative. And it's the processing and understanding bits that we teach the machines to help us with. And then the much more hyped is the generative AI. It's the most popular type today, I think. And that's the AI that creates the synthesized content like text, images, audio, and even animation and video, like Khaled told us earlier. But what it actually does, this generative AI, it recombines bits of training data by using math and statistics to answer its user's request. And these requests, they come in the form of a prompt, a command. And it does that in such a way that some of generative AI's critics call, and they come to explain it as a stochastic parrot. So what it does, if I say, for example, when I eat kanafa, I tend to drink, and then you would probably say tea or coffee or water, but you won't say chair or aeroplane because it doesn't make sense. And this is how generative AI works. It predicts the highest probability of what comes next, either be it words, pixels, or sounds. So this is what it does. And again, we don't know what the training data was, but we mostly consider AI software performing at its best when its output meets our expectations. Now, there are two things that I think are important, which I see as the positive side of generative AI. And one thing is something I learned where I see a lot of value 2 years ago while attending this forum, and by talking with attendees, working with ARIJ and other international journalists, and also the fact that this entire conference and forum is being translated from Arabic to English and from English to Arabic and other languages, is that the fact that most bespoke digital tools like software and web services, they use English as their default language, right? The default interface. So the menu items, the buttons, the descriptions are all in English. And if you have to understand this language in order to get the system to do what you want it to do. And some interfaces can be changed to other languages like Spanish or French or Mandarin, but not that many are translated into Arabic. And I think many of you here know that from experience. So, but the way that generative AI is now being presented to us as a user, also as a journalist, is as a conversational interface, as we call it. You can use natural language to talk to our software. And with that, I think there's a lot of power. People call one of these success criteria for ChatGPT that you were able to chat with an AI. It's not, you don't have to learn commands. You can just converse in a natural language. And that's a big contrast to the graphical user interfaces. So I think by using these conversational interfaces with AI, you can sidestep the language barrier, and that will open up possibilities to many people to understand and use these systems. Not only AI systems, but I think any piece of software will get this sort of new AI-powered way of interacting with it. It's not just for journalists, it will be for everyone in society. So that's one big point, I would say.
شكرا كثير لورنس. مروان برأيك
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Marwan, according to you, what should we be focusing on in terms of AI regarding journalists, of course? Well, the most important thing, well, let's say a couple of things. First, well, actually, whomever does not embark in this world, in this journey, will be just kicked out. and it will be replaced by other, perhaps younger journalists. And these are the rules of the game, because the users of the tools in an efficient way are not really abiding by ethics, so I think that journalists will have to use them. On another note, another important thing, I think that journalists should be trained further on the investigative journalism as investigation as per se, and not only analysis or journalism, as a good, especially that they do have a good background. Excuse me. Just for another comment, I think that if we want to produce good investigative journalists, I think that the whole AI and all technologies should be included in the curricula, especially the academic curricula. University students who are graduating should be aware of these technologies, should be kind of native of this knowledge. And I think that we as a group, this is one of our duties, and we should be supporting the whole curricula, the whole academic system. We should start from the very young ages, otherwise it would be quite difficult to teach, between brackets, all journalists. Yes, and this is why this will be the new ARIJ working plan with a special focus on training all journalists in terms of AI. Just a few questions in the last minutes we have. So please, quick questions. Please go ahead. Hello, I'm Nida Bassoumi from Saudi legal institution from Palestine. Well, we have talked about the advantages and disadvantages, but what about the disadvantages of the bias to AI? Because since October, almost all answers are being provided by AI in a biased way. So the bias of AI, how to deal with it, especially that it could be a real threat to journalists. And could you please just talk very quickly about AI that is adopted by social media platforms, i.e. algorithms. Just a quick word about it, please, because in the last few months, 30% of Palestinian media stopped making any profits because of AI. Well, just so as we said, it is a double-edged sword, and regarding AI, there is a bias that is a real threat. Thank you, Nida. Tom, could you please answer regarding this question, because, for instance, if we ask ChatGPT about Palestine, we will receive biased answers. So what is the solution? Because this would become even worse, and will be out of our control.
Yeah, so I think I try and separate some of the issues you're talking about, and because really we're not talking about one double-edged sword. We're talking about, 15 different swords. Each of them has 5 different edges. And so, of course, there's real problems with bias in AI and the way that plays out in terms of information that is served to users of all kinds of tools. And this has been the case for a very long time. I remember working with Syrian Archive when YouTube implemented a new content moderation algorithm, and hundreds of thousands of videos from Syria got taken down. Now, that's, of course, just inexcusable, and we need to hold the platforms that are doing this to account. The technology that was being used to do that can also be used for journalism, though. And so Syrian Archive are working with a company called VFrame, who are an open source, kind of very ethical computer vision company who help Syrian Archive identify different kinds of illegal munitions in their huge data set. And so this is the same technology that is supporting human rights and investigative journalism and being used in another case on YouTube to take down content that is basically the only evidence and some of the only reporting that we have of this conflict, right? So we need to sort of separate out, I suppose, the technology, the ethics, and the governance, and make sure that we're operating as investigative journalists in places that hold the highest standards of all of those things. And then we hold other people who are using these platforms to account.
شكرا كثير توم يعني وهذا الأساس صحافة الاستقصاء.
Thank you, Tom. And this is the basis of investigative journalism. And I think that we should be focusing in our work on AI, on the threats of AI, on the bias, on the misinformation. Raed, please be very brief.
Thank you. Actually, I'll make it a comment so nobody needs to respond to this. Okay. So my name is Raed Sharif. I'm the MENA director at the Executive Foundation. Thank you so much. This is great. You know, whenever we have a discussion about the AI, it's always about the ethical issues and the biases, and we know that, right? My main concern, though, is that actually we're skipping a very important ethical dilemma with AI, is the data. We deal with bias when we enter the data, but what if we don't have data? The Global South, historically, we don't have enough data, so whatever AI will do for us in the next 50 years will be driven by the Western, the North American, the European data. That's a bigger problem for me than just entering a data having bias. So for me, when I think about it, as an investigative journalist, really living in the North, the global North, I live in the global North, but I'm Palestinian, so I can wear both hats. Yes, I can be very busy with identifying the biases, try to mitigate the risk, and looking at the ethical principles. But we need investigative journalists in the South to understand how we bring our own data, where are the bottlenecks, what are the issues? So in 50 years, we have equal amounts of data from every part of the world that AI will be able to produce equal data for everybody. Because, you know, my fear, we've always been producing technologies and apps, you know, with all due respect, in North America and Europe, with a bunch of like white men, no diversity, and we suffer from it. Even when we design artificial hearts, it fits 70% of human body if it is men, not women. Right? But we can't afford it with AI. The inventions will be fast-paced. We will not be able to, you know, keep with that. So, this is my recommendation. We need to identify the problem in the Global South to have enough data, and then we can worry about the bias. But let's have the data first.
شكرا كثير رائد يعني لورنس الداتا فعلا مشكلة وتحديدا بالعالم.
Thank you so much, actually, Lawrence. Well, the lack of data in the Arab world is a real problem. So how can we find at least basic solutions? For instance, can we set, you know, useful AI tools in the Arabic language?
Yeah, I've researched a bit into that, and yeah, I know that the issue was until recently there seemed to be a lack of AI tools that has a good understanding of Arabic, but also African languages, and that can recognize Arabic and African names and places. And that obviously, as you said, so thank you very much for your thoughtful recommendation and thoughts. It excludes Arabic and African people, not just journalists, also from economic opportunities, right? And tools like ChatGPT, which turned 1 year old yesterday, became a hit around the world, but I've come to learn that the enthusiasm among techies, but also among journalists in the Arab world was somewhat diminished because of the complexity of the language, the inflection system, and the regional dialects, but also because of these biases. And I know there are some projects being developed, like ACE GPT and YAIS, which is a Gulf-developed large language model. And obviously it takes Arabic data, Arabic language data, but we don't know about its biases. And I've learned something from a recently published book from Joy Boulamwini, and she's of African descent, and she has written a book called Unmasking AI. And this is something that's at play with the previous one who had the question as well. It's what we call power shadows, because most of our AI software is being developed and controlled by American companies, and our social media platforms as well. They're the ones who make up the rules and that govern these systems. So if we don't build these systems ourselves, we'll have to adhere to their rules and play by their norms and with their algorithms. So I think there's also a role for ARIJ to bond together and to build a non or less biased. I don't think there's a non-biased, but a less biased, a more appropriate system that works for your tasks and your goals.
شكرا كثير مروان. ب10 ثواني، بعرف صعبة ب10 ثواني، بس ب10 ثواني.
Marwan, in 10 seconds, what is your recommendation, your advice to the Arab media that would start to use AI?
Work together, because the challenge is huge. We have not enough resources. We don't have enough skills. We are not producing enough data, so that's why we work collectively together. Without doing that, we'll always be looking out for things here and that. Thanks a lot for everybody. I'm glad to moderate this session. I'd like to ask you all to visit ARIJ exhibition for artificial intelligence and use our team, our colleagues Khalid, Samia, Hajar, and Ibrahim Ahmed, and myself. Ask us anything about artificial intelligence and products and future programs of ARIJ. We're continuing our session today. We hope that this forum is beneficial for you all. We are so happy to have you here.